Hello to my YouTube friends. It is very late on a Monday night. My wife and I went on a vacation last week. We flew from Dulles outside of DC down to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. We then got a ferry from there to Tortola, which is part of the British Virgin Islands. um, when we landed at the airport, we had to get a taxi to the ferry. Then we took a ferry to the Virgin Islands. And then we took another taxi to get to the marina where our boat was. We basically rented a cabin on a catamaran for 7 days. It's quite interesting. When you land in the U.S. Virgin Islands, I noticed they had all these signs about declaring firearms, which obviously we're not taking any firearms there, but firearms are legal in the U.S. Virgin Islands if you declare them, but they're not legal in the British Virgin Islands. But anyway, we took the um, you take a taxi from the airport to the port. Okay, so I don't know. I think it was like $10 or $15 a person in the taxi. They do it by flat rate. People in the U.S. Virgin Islands drive on the left, but traffic rules are kind of questionable or non-existent. So anyway, you land, you get your stuff on there, you go, and when you go to the port to go to the British side, you have to pay $10 a person for the immigration to the British Virgin Islands, and you have to book your passage on the ferry, which takes about an hour. And this guy comes out and he's like, "Oh, I got to take your cases," and he kept 20, 25 feet. And it's like you're expected to give him a $5 tip. It's like, oh my God, here we go. Here goes everybody with their hand out. So he takes your luggage, you pay your fee, you go through customs, you board the ferry to the British Virgin Islands. Then you get over there and you have to take another taxi to the marina where the catamaran is. That's like another, I think it's $15 a person and ends up being $30. And in the British Virgin Islands and the US Virgin Islands, they drive on the left. But almost all of the vehicles down there are left hand drive, like you find in the United States. And traffic regulations are sort of, well, they're suggestions. So, um, one thing I noticed is the British Virgin Islands seemed a little nicer than the US Virgin Islands. But anyway, when we got there, we ate lunch and I think we had some shrimp and some fries and two or three beers. And it was like $75. And they automatically put a 20% gratuity onto things. So to me, it sounded like a ripoff. The fries were good, the shrimp was okay, but it wasn't a $75 lunch by any stretch, at least in my opinion. So that was on the US side. So we get to the British Virgin Islands. We go through the taxi, go through immigration and all that. We get on a catamaran. It was wonderful. We had a two-person crew with 10 guests. You couldn't have asked for nicer people. The captain was really squared away, and the first mate and the cook, she cooked everything from scratch. She could put Bobby Flay to shame. Or Gordon Ramsay or any of those people. Made everything from scratch. I mean, it was wonderful. I brought snacks with me thinking, oh, what if we get hungry on the ship? That didn't happen. Um, she kept us very, very, very well fed. breakfast, lunch, and dinner, appetizers between meals. Um, we were on a 59-foot catamaran. The cabins are really small, not a whole lot of room in there, but we really enjoyed ourselves. We did a lot of snorkeling. I got to be right next to a giant sea turtle that had suckerfish like stuck on it. The turtle didn't care. It was right next to me when I was snorkeling. I had enough. I could get some air and stay right next to it, and it actually came up to breathe 2 or 3 times. Those things are just so majestic the way they flow through the water. I saw a lot of fish. Um, we did a couple times where we stopped at one of the places was that I remember very well was called the Soggy Dollar, and the drink they had was called the Painkiller. It was like some fruit juice, a lot of rum, and a little bit of nutmeg. They actually take nutmeg and scrape it on this, looks like a cheese grater. They put pieces in it. It was about $9 a drink, but oh my God, was it good. Um, the British Virgin Islands and the U.S. Virgin Islands both take the dollar. They use the U.S. dollar. In my view, things were way overpriced. The food was okay, but you know, $18 for a cheesesteak that was nothing like you'd get in Philadelphia. That was a little steep, but nonetheless, we had fun. But when you leave the British Virgin Islands, they charge you to go in, but I think it's $10 a person. They charge you $20 a person to leave. So you go down there and you spend all your hard-earned money, and the bastards want to charge you a fee to leave. Nah, I'll never go there again. But the boat trip was great, but the airport at St. Thomas was how do you say it, a cluster foxtrot. We got there, we had a 4:45 flight from there to Dulles. We got there at about 11:30. It took us 3 hours to get through security. Um, you get there and you check in your bags, but they won't let you check in your bags. They give you the tag that goes around it. Then they send you through this long line that wrapped the whole way around the front of the building. And you go through security. Then you go through the United States TSA and customs. So it was a rigmarole. I wouldn't recommend it, but fortunately, we were at the airport like 5 hours out of our flight, but it took 3 hours to get through security. So by the time we got to the gate, it was nice, had time to get some drinks and stuff. Um, Another thing I wanted to add is that when you are in the, um, I was going to add something about the British Virgin Islands. Now I'm not thinking of it. But when you leave the U.S. Virgin Islands at St. Thomas, you go through the TSA stuff, you go through customs while you're there. But the good news is, after you do all that, you get to Dulles and you just get your luggage and go home. That was really nice. Something similar happened to us. We went to Aruba 7 years ago, and we had to go through U.S. Customs at the airport in Aruba, and we were between two buildings and there was no air. It was brutally hot. It was awful. Um, the airport at St. Thomas was pretty bad, but at least it had air conditioning. It wasn't working 100%, but at least they tried. It was working somewhat. Um, if you go anywhere down there, I would suggest not renting a car. Get a taxi. They drive on the left, and traffic laws are just sort of a suggestion. But anyway, we're glad to be home. Um, we sort of unplugged down there because we didn't have cell phone or internet service. If you go down there, get a eSIM. If your phone has it, get an eSIM and get an international plan. My phone does not have eSIM capability. My wife's phone does. There was one plan through our carrier that it was like $24 for a week, but you only got 1 gig of data, which isn't squat. So they do have towers down there, but if you don't have a plan, you won't have coverage. There were two, maybe three places we went while we were down there that had Wi-Fi. But when you go to a place like that, everybody's trying to use the signal. So, don't expect to be watching videos or anything. It was just enough to check email. Um, I disabled my Facebook account before we went, but you won't be watching videos, but it's enough to send and receive email. And if you have an internet-based phone number such as Google Voice, you can communicate with home. Um, I never thought I'd be happy to get back in the U.S., but it felt good to be home. Those catamaran trips are wonderful, but all the couples we had, there were 5 other couples close in age to us. Everybody got along, but if you were on a small boat like that with people who you didn't like, it would really suck. But we lucked out. We got some good people. Some of them were a little more sociable than others, but what are you going to do? That's life. But I would I would highly recommend taking a catamaran cruise. A catamaran is basically a boat with two keels, and this one had diesel engines and sails. So the cabins, there's 3 cabins on one side and 2 on the other. Plus, there's one cabin for the captain and the first mate. We had a captain and first mate, both from South Africa. Amazing people. I mean, I thought we got on there and I thought, oh my God, there's only 2 people who are going to take care of 10. Well, they did. They did it in spades. Those people earned themselves a very generous tip from all of the passengers who were aboard. We were on it's basically like a timeshare boat. It was called Trade Winds. And we were on I think it was called the Allegria or something like that. The boat was actually registered in Antigua, but they sail around the Virgin Islands. Um, the snorkeling was just unbelievable. The water was warm, and it was like, you jump in and it's cold for about 10 seconds, and after that, it just felt great. We got a lot of sun. On the ship, we had unlimited, so we took advantage of the open bar since we didn't have to drive anywhere. And the whole time I was gone, I just ate nonstop and I drank nonstop, and I only gained 2 pounds the whole week. So the food was good. There was plenty of it, but she made everything from scratch. Like I said, this girl could put Bobby Flay to shame. Everything was, you know, cut up scratch. She made it in this little kitchen. It blows my mind, but I would highly recommend doing that. The worst part is trying to get the hell out of there when you're ready to come home. The airport was overwhelmed. I don't know if it was just because it was a Saturday or what, but it did feel good to be home. The U.S. Virgin Islands and the British Virgin Islands are very close to each other, and we kind of sailed around. We stayed in the British side, but we were very, very close to the border. And as I said, they take the dollar everywhere, which is good. You didn't have to change currency, but in my view, a lot of the stuff down there is way overpriced. We went on shore and it was like, you know, um, something like a cheesesteak was like $18, and then the fries are like $6.95, and most of the drinks are, you know, $8 to $12 each. I don't know. It just seemed a little steep to me. When we were in the airport at St. Thomas, I got a half-pound hamburger in what was a bun that was not steamed, or it wasn't stale, but it just didn't. The bun just, I don't know. It was kind of cheesy, but no pun intended. It was a half-pound burger, which wasn't bad, but all they had on it was lettuce and tomato and ketchup and mustard and a fountain drink. It was $24. I'm like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. I know airports are a little more expensive, but that was a total ripoff. I'm not sure I would go there again. You know, I don't know. We didn't see a whole lot of the Virgin Islands, but the water and the snorkeling and the coral and everything was beautiful. The scenery was amazing. And the sailboat, you know, it can sail or it can use diesel power. So that was kind of good. But it's getting kind of late. It's, you know, probably almost a quarter to 12 here. I'm not running on very many cylinders tonight, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Um, I want to give a shout to my two friends from South Africa, Tian and Renette. You guys rock. Uh, Everybody else, just be glad if you're an American, be glad you have a US passport because it certainly does make travel worldwide easier. A lot of people like to hate on the United States right now, but after having been in 35 countries on 3 continents, you know, we do have our problems, but man, there's nowhere else I'd rather call home. So I wish everybody a wonderful night. And I'm sorry if I'm talking a little bit low. My wife is asleep. So peace.